Hello, Dog Nation. Happy Friday to you. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger. And we are ready for a great day as hashtag Go for Two in 22 continues. Been seeing a lot of those two fingers in the air. Back in Athens on Saturday. You know you're going to see that. Georgia fans excited about being back between the hedges and creating an unbelievable atmosphere in Sanford Stadium for the Deep South's oldest rivalry to make things miserable on the Auburn Tigers. We believe that's going to be the case. In fact, we're going to use some of Kirby Smart's words today to, I think, challenge UGA fans to do what is needed on Saturday, to create the atmosphere that is required on Saturday. We're going to do that here coming up in a couple of minutes. Also, Jeff Sintel stops by. There is an absolutely loaded list of visitors, in some cases an official visit, other cases unofficial visits, in some cases 5 stars making return trips to Athens. Boy, a lot to break down here when it comes to the recruiting standpoint. So Jeff Sintel is going to give that to us here today. I'm going to make my official picks for the big games of the weekends, including, not the weekends, but the weekend, including a little bit of insight on Georgia facing a huge spread against Auburn, what exactly that means. We'll talk about that. One of the UGA accounts has put out something very funny on social media. I think it's meant to only be a joke, but we're going to have some fun. We're going to have some fun with that nonetheless. We'll do that here coming up in just a couple of minutes' time as well. So this is a loaded show, and it's going to be a great way to close out our week, getting ready for Georgia Auburn in Athens on Saturday, and I hope to see a lot of you there for that coming up on Saturday. We're also going to begin our show this way. David Pollock, who we've actually heard from Pollock on this show this week. We went back and played some old audio from him a few days ago. But a very credible voice because he's obviously a great former Dog, terrific analyst on ESPN, and the guy that really is still very plugged in and close to this Georgia program. I think he has given some very candid remarks on what he's seeing from Georgia right now. Some of this is tangible on the field between the white lines. Some of this is slightly more intangible. And in listening to Pollack, it's kind of caused me to kind of reconsider a little bit something that I said earlier this week. So let's start with that right there. It is a great way to set the stage for Georgia Auburn on Saturday, and we're really happy to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I really get the sense that the Georgia fans that I've heard from this week, whether it be just kind of walking around in life or on this show, social media, things like that, I think there's a lot of excitement to be between the hedges tomorrow in Sanford Stadium for Georgia Auburn. We're going to talk a lot about that on the show here today and the energy that seems to be growing for one of these sort of marquee signature home games that we kind of live for. This is a rivalry game a lot of us experienced a lot in our lifetime. It's a chance to renew it on Saturday, and that just sounds really fun. Now, in addition to that, there is also, I think, some curiosity about what we'll see from Georgia and the belief among many fans that Georgia needs to play better against Auburn, even though Auburn itself is not very good, needs to play better against Auburn because Georgia, frankly, didn't play very well last Saturday at Missouri and the week prior to that back at home against Kent State. That Georgia, an elite team, we all believe a national championship contender. You've heard us say go for 2 in 22. That's the mission here for Georgia. But the last couple of weeks, that hasn't quite been, the scene for UGA. So with that in mind, let's set the stage for kind of what we need to see from the Dogs in a very big atmosphere around this game on Saturday afternoon. I don't know there's much of a better voice to help us do that than David Pollock. Now, I had known that Pollock had said something interesting this week and had kind of planned on using it here on this Friday, but having a chance to kind of settle in and really listen closely to some of the stuff that Pollock specifically had said about Georgia, in a way, it has kind of gotten me to reconsider something I said on this show a little earlier this week. So I want to kind of lay this out here for the next couple of minutes. David Pollock, I think, expresses about 3 concerns for Georgia. One of these, the larger point, somewhat intangible, more difficult to measure. 2 of these are on the field, much more tangible, and I think you'll find it all to be pretty interesting. So this comes from the ESPN College Game Day podcast. Pollock is on there with Reese Davis. Now, here's what you're going to hear. Reese Davis is going to set up David to talk about Georgia. But I want you to listen to what Reese says here as well, because he becomes another one of these national voices that doesn't seem nearly as alarmed by Georgia's recent play as some UGA fans are. Now, that's worth considering here too, but then listen to David Pollack's evaluation of maybe why Georgia has found itself in slightly closer games than experts thought they should have been over the course of the last 2 weeks. This from the ESPN podcast earlier this week.
I'm completely unperturbed by Georgia's struggles. I don't think it's a big deal. I think it's a simple case of sleepwalking and knowing they're better than the last couple of teams they've played, and it's just not a big deal. David Pollack, your thoughts?
Well, okay. Here's what I'll say about that. I might agree that they didn't. I don't think they've taken their last couple opponents like they should, but I also think there's something to be said about that. That means there's a lot of youth. Like, that means there's immaturity on the team. Like, when you look back at last year's team, I think one of the most important things, or one of the things we looked at the biggest, we were like, dude, these are a bunch of grown-ups. Jordan Davis, all these guys, they're going to stay in. Devontae Wyatt, they're going to stay in line. They're going to stay on task. They're going to stay focused. Nakobe Dean, they're going to cover the small things that are very important to win. I think now you got a lot of youth. And what happens with youth? You wake up, some days you feel good, some days you don't. Some days you really want to play, and some days you don't. Some days you're really motivated. And so I don't think it speaks well for the maturity of the team.
So I think that's really interesting. And I want you to consider a couple different angles here. First of all, don't discount what Reese Davis says there. I like Reese Davis. I think he does a good job hosting the show. Reese is kind of a Southern guy. He's deeply entrenched in college football culture. Like Reese, I've interviewed him many times. Reese is a college football dude, and his perspective on this comes from someone who's just been around the sport for a long time. And when someone like Reese Davis says, hey, I'm not perturbed at all by the fact that Georgia's played poorly the last couple of weeks, he's kind of giving – remember what was it that one of the ESPN writers said this week, a mulligan? Reese Davis is sort of also giving Georgia a little bit of a mulligan. Hey, the standard's not perfection. Georgia hasn't looked great, but they didn't really need to look great. That all of this, according to Reese Davis, may be a little bit inconsequential. That is not the way most of the Georgia fans I've heard from feel. Most of the Georgia fans I've heard from are a little more concerned about the level of play the last couple of weeks, and I understand why you are, but you should at least consider the possibility that Reese Davis, who's a little bit more removed from this, outside the bubble of DawgNation, you should at least consider the possibility that what he's saying is true, that maybe these kind of recent blemishes or warts, imperfections, maybe it doesn't really mean anything. Maybe it doesn't matter all that much. You should at least consider the possibility that might be true. But I think you'll also find the words of David Pollock to be pretty interesting right there. That for people who say, Georgia wasn't motivated against Kent State, may not have even really been motivated against Missouri because deep down Georgia knew it couldn't lose. Well, David says, if that's true, speaks right to immaturity. Speaks right to the youth of this team. Speaks right to the contrast between what he calls grown men, Jordan Davis, Devontae White, Nakobe Dean, guys like that, on the 2021 team. And I'm going to credit some of y'all. Some of y'all have been on this topic. I got messages after the Kent State game. One in particular stands out to me of somebody who sent me a side-by-side comparison of, Georgia beat Charleston Southern by 1,000,000 points last year. UAB, who's a bowl team more often than not, and a conference, USA division winner pretty frequently, league winner at times. Georgia was 56-7 in that game. I think that was the score, whatever it was, 50-something to 7 or whatever last year. That Georgia just didn't play around last season, and I think most Georgia fans say that speaks to the maturity of that team. And David Pollack says kind of the same thing of, okay, well maybe Georgia wasn't motivated, maybe that's why they played poorly. But if you're not motivated, then maybe you're not as mature as you need to be. And I think a lot of Georgia fans take that pretty seriously. And I'll tell you what this caused me to reconsider. Yesterday, we talked about that guy Brandon Council for Auburn and we're going to demolish Georgia and we're going to sneak in there like a SWAT team and, quiet that place down and then get out. And what I said yesterday on the show is that there are two sides of the same coin in terms of how you respond to this. This speaks to the immaturity of Auburn, and the challenge for Georgia is to be the more mature game on the field on Saturday. We said this yesterday. But on the other side, it becomes kind of an invitation for a street fight. Maybe Georgia should take that invitation. I'm not telling you I no longer think that, but I definitely think, in light of listening more closely to what David Pollock is saying, maybe the Auburn bulletin board material just kind of comes at the wrong time. Like maybe this is not one of those things that you want to lean heavily into and treat this as a chance to kind of take your emotions to a fever pitch. Maybe Georgia last week kind of showed some of that immaturity with the pushing and shoving before the game and some of the stuff that went on there, which we've kind of talked about. That maybe just being the more mature team and being the team that kind of brushes all this off, maybe that's the right way for Georgia to approach this right now. I'm not saying that there won't be any attempt to use this as motivation, but maybe I just sort of feel a little less fired up about that notion, kind of listening more carefully to a guy like Pollack, who did play the game with a lot of intensity, but also kind of understands the other part of the professional way that you sometimes have to approach this. I take Pollack's words pretty seriously there. But in the midst of also talking about that, David also kind of took it away from the intangible stuff, the stuff that's more difficult for us to measure, the maturity, the experience of the team, and also kind of veered into some of the stuff that's also happening on the field too. And I think you'll find this just as interesting. David Pollack from the ESPN College Game Day podcast.
I think the offensive line got absolutely manhandled, which is a big problem. You need balance. You got to be able to run the football. I think there's an issue at left guard. I think they got to find – they've got a bunch of running backs going. I think they need to find their best one or two maybe and stick with their best one or two. I thought Stetson played okay, but the defense gave up – I think the defense gave up like 200 yards on 6 plays, something like that. And the rest of the game, they gave up, a small number of yards per play. But I think it has something to do with focus for sure, Reese. But I also think this says something about your maturity level, about your leadership. And you better get that stuff figured out down the road, because if you don't feel like playing all the time, you're going to get your hiney whipped.
I love it. I mean, I think that David Pollack is delivering exactly the message that Georgia needs to hear. And that's not the reason that Pollack is saying that. He's just trying to entertain a podcast audience. But the message that he delivers is, I think, the one that's probably pretty good for UGA, both in terms of the spirit of the team. Hey, maturity, focus, treat every Saturday as the most important game in the world, but also kind of some of the evaluative stuff there too. David doesn't hold back in saying the offensive line kind of got, was the word he used, manhandled a little bit last week, pointing to one of those guard spots in particular where that was an issue. You might could have said both guard spots, but certainly pointing out one of those guard spots in particular where that was true. Also, David kind of leans into the possible need to kind of pare down some of the playmakers. We've done that on this show related to who Georgia's throwing the ball to. I believe they need to throw it to Brock Bowers way more, probably Darnell Washington a little more, and just kind of figure out who you want to try to deliver the football to. But Pollock also does that from the running game as well, that right now Georgia does not have an elite-level rushing attack. And if Georgia's going to be an elite-level offense, it's got to get more from the rushing attack than what it's getting right now. And David says, hey, maybe you need to pare down the number of guys that you're trusting in a spot like that in order to get that done. And he doesn't specify who would be his guys or, who we would eliminate. He doesn't do that, but he certainly suggests that as a possibility, which once again kind of reflects, I think, a mood and an opinion we've heard from a good number of Georgia fans. The overall bottom line here is those are strong remarks from Pollack. He is acknowledging himself what some of you said you've seen. Struggles with the offensive line, need to be better with the rushing attack, need to shore up things with some of the defense. He speaks directly to that. But the overarching point from him is, hey, he's also seen a team that doesn't have a lot of experience, and that lack of experience has kind of bred some immaturity. Well, Saturday's a day to be mature. I don't care how immature Auburn is and how much trash they're talking right now about what they're going to come in here and do that's frankly untethered to reality. Georgia on Saturday gets to be the more mature team. If you want to use the Brandon Council trash talk as a little extra motivation, that's fine. But ultimately what really matters is your intrinsic motivation, your desire to be the best you can be on each and every Saturday. David Pollack says he hasn't seen that from Georgia the last couple of weeks. With that in mind, this Saturday against a hated rival, that would be a good time to show it. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and glad to have you with us. No matter how you get to us today, live on video, we start 9:45, 1st and 15, DawgNation.com, DawgNation app. 10 a.m. after that, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We're on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. Available as a podcast wherever you find them. Apple, Spotify, all kinds of great podcast platforms. Really all the places you can find podcasts. You can find our show. And we're happy that you do that. And we're incredibly grateful to our friends at Kroger for making it all possible. Kroger, a great sponsor of ours and has been for a long time. And they've got a great opportunity for you to be aware of, for you and your family here over the course of the upcoming month. It's called Kroger Chef Junior. So if you've got kids, this is an incredible experience for them to be a part of a guided kids cooking experience. I think it's cool to learn how food's prepared and learn how all the stuff that goes along with that. And that's one of the things that Kroger's going to do for you, including making tostadas coming up here this month, both on October the 8th, that's this upcoming weekend, and on the 22nd there as well at select Kroger locations. Now, when you join in on the Kroger Chef Junior event, it's a 30-minute class where you kind of learn how to make the food item, in this case the tostada, but you also get some stuff with that there as well. It's an apron and patch, a chef's hat, a recipe card and box, a mixing spoon. It's just $7 per child, and you got 2 great opportunities to do that this month on the 8th and then on the 22nd. So you can go to the website KrogerChefJunior.com for more on that. Kroger Chef Junior, that's the word junior spelled out, Junior. Go to KrogerChefJunior.com for a lot more on that. All right, it's Jeff Sintel coming up here in a little bit. It's also around the doghouse here in a second there as well. But let me do one kind of housekeeping thing before we get there. The last Georgia home game was so much fun for me for our DawgNation postgame show presented by the UGA Bookstore. They got a great event coming up this weekend. Huge autograph guests stopping by. Lindsey Scott's going to be there. Vince Uli's going to be there. Buck Ballew's going to be there. Malcolm Mitchell's going to be there. So they got a great collection of autograph guests taking place this Saturday. But after the game is over with, we're going to be there as well for our DawgNation postgame show up on the second floor of the UGA Bookstore. What made last home game for me so much fun is, for the very first time ever, we invited a lot of you to come on the show and share your thoughts about Georgia. And you'll remember, it wasn't a great game for Georgia against Kent State. But, man, we got some great breakdown, some great commentary on what had happened there and kind of what needed to be better. And I loved mixing those live comments in with what we were also getting from the folks who joined us on Zoom. And, by the way, your Zoom calls to our show have been wonderful. We have had so much fun having a little bit more interactive version of the show, because when all I do is read your comment, people don't really learn about you or see what you're all about. They don't really kind of see what you have going on there. But when you join us live, we can kind of talk back and forth a little bit. Now, we're also trying to get a lot of callers on there. So, we don't have, unfortunately, unlimited time, but we have been able to kind of have the interaction back and forth, and we did some of that live and in person last Saturday. So here's my invitation. Saturday after the game for our DawgNation postgame show presented by the UGA Bookstore, we want to invite you to come and be a part of it with us. So if you're leaving the stadium, hey, just stop by. It's right there next to the Tate Student Center. It's right across from the stadium. Stop by, come up to the second floor. We'll make a little bit of a call a line if you want to, but we move it through really fast, and we'll let you pop on. You can share your thoughts about UGA. Hopefully it's all good news, but whatever it is, we'll be ready to cover it. But the point is, we want to see you there for that there on Saturday. Help us make the post-game show as much fun as it can possibly be. Your interaction is one of the things that do that. So hopefully on Saturday we'll get a chance to do just that. All right, as I said before, Jeff Sintel talking UGA recruiting here coming up in a couple of minutes. Before that, though, Around the Doghouse, presented by Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. And speaking of being at home, Georgia is at home on Saturday. And I want to give a little bit of a challenge to UGA fans. Now, I believe they're going to do this, whether I challenge them to or not. I truly do. But nonetheless, I want to just take a couple of minutes to mention this. Georgia really needs you on Saturday. Not need you to win the game or anything like that. We think that Georgia can beat Auburn pretty much no matter what. But based on what David Pollack said there about, hey, immature team, needs to kind of grow up a little bit, needs to kind of find itself after a couple of weeks of scuffles, why not give the Dogs the emotional reboot that maybe they need? Or why not go out and give Auburn the intense response that a rival like that deserves? Let's make Sanford Stadium on Saturday an unbelievable home field advantage for UGA and a miserable experience for Brian Harsin and Auburn. We think this could be Harsin's last game as the Auburn coach. Let's send him out in style on Saturday with an incredible atmosphere. And I believe that's going to happen. And if you think back to almost exactly this time a year ago, it was actually one Saturday prior to this. That was the Georgia-Arkansas game. And you remember that day that when Georgia was kind of forced to play a big home game against a good team at noon, and everybody's kind of frustrated about that. But in a lot of ways, that almost became a little bit of a rallying cry for Georgia fans that day of they wanted to create the best noon crowd atmosphere of all time. They wanted to do that. And I think in a lot of ways they probably did. And what Kirby Smart said about Georgia fans at the end of the Arkansas game, which was almost exactly a year ago. I'd love to hear him say the same thing about Georgia fans after this game on Saturday. Let's give you Kirby as a reminder here of what the standard is for the Georgia crowd on Saturday, this from last season.
I think all you guys would admit they were elite, and we noticed it. And to come out there in warm-ups and coming out of the tunnel to look up there and see every seat full at a noon kick, it's special to be at Georgia, and they impacted the game. I thought the first series for Arkansas on offense, our crowd was extremely disruptive. I thought our crowd impacted the block punt in terms of cadence and things like that, which forced a touchdown. So I give our crowds, our fans, at least 10 points, and that's big.
Kirby gave you 10 points last season. In a game that Georgia won 37-0, he said 10 points came from you, from your effort. How many points are you going to get on Saturday? How many points are you going to create for this team? Because, by the way, one of the things that Auburn's been pretty good at doing is actually getting out to leads in SEC play. Got out to one against LSU last Saturday, has done that a few times now. Let's not pay attention to what happens to them after they get these leads. But nonetheless, they've gotten some leads. They've actually gotten off to fast starts. And, Doofus, whatever his name is, said that they're going to come out and demolish Georgia. All the more reason for, as Kirby said, to be elite as a crowd, to be disruptive, to be special. We know it's going to be a good atmosphere, but is it going to be a special atmosphere? Is that what's going to happen on Saturday? How many points can the Georgia crowd claim responsibility for by the time this game is over on Saturday evening? And what will Kirby Smart say about that crowd when the game is done? I think that's a fun thing to consider. And my sincere challenge to Georgia fans is, hey, do it big. It's a 3:30 start. That's a pretty full day of tailgating, and it's going to be a beautiful day in Athens. Y'all, this is the kind of stuff that makes Athens, Georgia, the University of Georgia, SEC football special, and it's our chance to bask in that on Saturday and make it as fun as we possibly can be. A bunch of recruits going to be on hand to see the show. Put on a show for them. I know that you will. That is Around the Doghouse, and it is presented today by our friends at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. As we said, Georgia looking forward to being at home. For some of you, though, you look around and you say, I'm not quite so sure this needs to be my home anymore. You've got exciting things you're considering in terms of maybe a new job, getting closer to family, or whatever your reason might be for wanting to make a move. Well, our friends at Berkshire Hathaway Home Service believe the best time for new beginnings is right now, and for you, that might mean a new home and the need to sell your old house. Or maybe it's time to kind of take that step towards being an investor. That's something you've always wanted to do. You watch the TV shows. You see other folks doing this, and you're saying, hey, it's my time to do something like that kind of right now there as well. Well, that's also the kind of new beginning you can explore with our friends at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services there as well. Or, it's a commercial property for your business. Maybe it's expanding that commercial property. That's another thing that Berkshire Hathaway Home Services can help you with there too. What I love about our friends there at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, you're talking about, offices all across the state of Georgia, huge number of associates doing hard work, and the experience they gain from having been through this many times they have makes them what I like to think of as sort of a transaction expert. What that means is that the real work in real estate begins once you're under contract. How do you get that contract to the closing table? How do you make it a satisfactory outcome for both parties in the agreement, a win-win solution that kind of keeps these deals held together and makes everybody feel good about the process? Berkshire Hathaway Home Service understands all about that. So if you've got a need to sell a house, buy a home, make an investment, get involved in commercial property, this is the time to do that. The best time for new beginnings is right now with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Find them online at bhhsgeorgia.com. That's bhhsgeorgia.com. All right, good to have you here today. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Oh, we got a really funny thing from George. This is actually pretty well done, that we're going to show you before the show is done. I don't think it means anything. I'm not going to get drawn off sides by this, but I do think it's fun nonetheless, and so we'll do that before we're done on today's show. But serious business prior to that. Massive list of recruiting visitors for Sanford Stadium tomorrow, and what we believe is going to be an incredible, special, elite atmosphere. Who does Georgia have a chance to impress on the recruiting front? Let's find out right now from our recruiting insider, Jeff Sintel, as we go on the road with Jeff, assisted by AAA.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We will say hello to Jeff Sintel here on the road, assisted by AAA, and want to talk to him a lot about the recruiting visitors going to be on tap for the Dogs tomorrow. And Jeff, this is sort of one of those kind of perfect storm type things of, hey, we're kind of into October. The weather's really nice. The 3:30 start makes it a little bit easier for players who played on a previous Friday night. It's a kind of a, Auburn's not very good, but it still sort of sounds like a big game, Georgia versus Auburn. This is fertile soil for big-time visitor lists, and Georgia's got about as good as one as you're going to be able to put together, at least based on some of the online chatter that I have seen thus far. So sets up to be a very big recruiting day for Georgia tomorrow, does it not?
Hey, Brandon. Hey, man. Good morning, everybody. I would say this, Brandon. The online chatter is chattering. And what it's chattering about is, let's see, Georgia kind of topped off its wide receiver needs about a week ago with Tyler Williams. He'll be there. Probably what's left for the class. How about some edge rushers? How about some running backs? Daniel Wilson, 5-star edge, will be there out of Venice, Florida. Samuel Mpemba, 5-star edge out of IMG Academy. Native of St. Louis will be there. Brandon, here's this neat little tidy bow. We have a little thing called Before the Hedges every Wednesday, where every Wednesday we rattle off the top targets that we feel Georgia has to get involved with, has to sign to produce its optimum recruiting class. Brandon, all 5, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, they are all expected to be there this weekend. And, oh, yeah, it also feels like the entire top 10 of the class of 2025 is also planning to be in Athens on Saturday as well. So you got the 2023s for the Visions, Bulldogs future and present, and then you got 2025 for the far future Bulldogs down the line.
So you mentioned, and you see some of those, a great job by our producer Michael Carvell getting some of those names on the list there that are going to be on hand for that with official visitors. I want to focus on one of those there for a moment when it comes to Roderick Robinson, the running back who's a UCLA commit. And, running back's been kind of a hot topic around Georgia as of late, and when Georgia kind of missed on Justice Haynes, you were kind of left to wonder, okay, what does that mean for Georgia at the running back position here in this cycle? And it was kind of unclear at the time. And it seems like, the Georgia relationship with Robinson's kind of flourished somewhat since then. I guess give me some intel here on Robinson taking the official, but also just a little bit more on him as a player. How does he fit into what Georgia has, what Georgia needs? What is your kind of feeling about Robinson as a running back overall?
Well, let's just cut straight to the heart of the entree here, Brandon. Big back, 230 pounds, 6'1", 230. And if you follow Georgia's recruiting as closely as I do, and I bet you do, you sit there and you go, Georgia's backs for the last few years have had some archetypes. There's been the flashy third down guy, James Cook, DeAndre Swift, Dejon Edwards even right now, Kenny McIntosh right now. And there have been the power guys. You see Branson Robinson is a power guy. Kendall Milton is a power guy. Zamir White, even though he had that 4.4 speed, was probably seen as more of a between-the-tackles guy. Immediately when you look at Roderick Robinson, we must preface all this conversation with one of Brandon's sponsor-type disclaimers that we must report right now that Roderick Robinson is currently committed to the University of California, Los Angeles, and he's currently a Bruin. That having been said, he visited Texas A&M last week. Dell McGee came to visit him for his high school game last Friday night. Lo and behold, Roderick Robinson is at Georgia for his official visit this weekend. I think that's big, Brandon. I think that's big because, one, Georgia has an opening at running back for this class. I think number 2 is that, one of the things you're reporting and when you dig up things about Roderick Robinson, you want to know, okay, he's 230 pounds. Is he fast? Well, we've got information that he's been laser timed in the 4.58, 4.56 range in the 40. Number 2, can he catch? It seems like Todd Monken's offense is evolving to where they like those extended handoffs a lot with their backs. Well, it turns out his head coach at high school at Lincoln High, former home of Terrell Davis and Marcus Allen as high school backs, mind you. He played receiver in the NFL, kick return in the NFL. He says those hands are solid, stamped. He even plays some slot receiver for his team. Brandon, the thing I really want to kind of shout from the rooftops here about Roderick Robinson, I think that makes him a little bit different, is he qualifies the biggest check that Dell McGee has always looked for, that Kirby Smart has always looked for, and that's that big back capable of grinding out those tough fourth-quarter yards in the SEC. Here's a stat for you, my man. He has 1,500 yards rushing so far this year. That's 7 games, and that's 12.4 yards per carry. Man, all that sounds great. But here's the thing that Dell McGee looks for. Those are the dog yards. If a play is blocked up to get 5 yards and you get 6, well, there's a lot of backs. Every back in the country, Georgia recruits can get that. But if the play is blocked up to get 4 or 5 yards and that back gets 7, 8, 9 yards, those extra yards are called dog yards. Roderick Robinson has 800 yards of those 1,500 this season, Brandon, after first contact. That's the definition of dog yards. That's why I think all those many reasons tidied up together are why I think this is a big official visit for Georgia.
And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but it's kind of interesting. Like, these are the backs that Dell McGee seems to really gravitate towards, as opposed to, like, say, an in-state name like a Jamarian Wilcox, who's maybe a little bit more of a speed-type player, and maybe, to use your phrase, a little bit less of a dog-yard type player, but certainly a guy that knows how to turn on that speed. Given the choice, you know, it seems like McGee sort of leans more in the direction of a guy like Robinson and maybe less in the direction of a guy like Wilcox, because Robinson just sort of, to me, looks more like the running backs that Georgia already has.
Yeah, that's fair. Branson Robinson specifically, and Andrew Paul was, you know, I kind of wish folks could have gotten to see a little bit of Andrew Paul this year. He was turning a lot of heads in camp. People were saying he was probably inching ahead of Branson Robinson as well in fall camp because he was impressing a lot of guys. And he's another 225-pound back. But you look at Georgia's depth chart and you figure this is an NFL resume year for Kenny McIntosh, and you figure that, you know, Kendall Milton still has the stuff and would test very well with, you know, great close back half of the season to also have an NFL early entry type look to his game as well. And then it leaves Georgia with Dejon Edwards, Brandon, who I think probably might arguably be perhaps the best back Georgia has right now. And then you've got a guy like Paul, you've got a guy like Robinson, and then you're seeking out this next Robinson, and you're wondering, okay, has Georgia kind of got too many dress shoes in the closet and not enough, you know, evening, night on the town type loafers or whatever? And I think that's what a lot of those things you wanted to find out about Roderick Robinson really mattered. You know, can he catch? Is he fast? Does he have wiggle? Well, he's kind of got all that. He's kind of showed all of that on tape for Lincoln High School in San Diego, California right now. So for a back, you know, Brandon, let's be clear. Let's stamp this the way it is, historically matter of fact. Prior to this month, October, Georgia had never gone past mid-September, and I think of names like DeAndre Swift. I think of names like Elijah Holyfield way back when in that first recruiting class. Dell McGee always had a featured anchor back for the University of Georgia committed by mid-September. And now you've got Georgia already into the first week of October without that running back commitment. Of course, there's reasons why. Georgia went after Reuben Owens. Georgia went after Richard Young. Georgia went after Justice Haynes. There were some swing and misses there for a myriad of reasons. But now here we are in October. Brandon, there's also going to be Jordan Louis in the house, another back that moved into the state of Georgia, a 3-star back currently committed to West Virginia. Picked up a lot of interest lately, and North Carolina has been on him hard lately. That's another guy who tells me if Georgia was to offer that, he would really have to seriously reevaluate his recruitment. So I think October, especially October, November, is going to be big for Georgia in finding those new wave Monken, Dell McGee kind of hybrid backs for the Georgia offense.
Let me also say this. In your reporting from going back to Before the Hedges on Wednesday, guys like Chris Peel, Jordan Hall, Sam Mpemba, you really get a sense of what this defensive class can look for in the class of 2023. I mean, if Georgia's not in good shape with Mpemba after you've seen him play 9 weeks in a row, I don't know what to tell you. And then, you know, Peel and Hall's a guy you've talked about plenty, that you certainly seem to have the ability to identify who are those big remaining targets of the Dogs on the defensive side of the ball, don't you?
Yeah, good point. Good point of clarity there, Brandon. And, you know, it's kind of funny. I was making the joke with some of the scribes that cover the Georgia football team on a day-to-day basis. I think Mpemba has seen Georgia as much as some beat writers have over the last month and a half, because he was there for Stanford. He was there for Missouri. He's planned to be in Athens again for Auburn. Gabe Harris is going to be there. And really so many little subplots and little stories. Chris Peel, for example, Brandon. Peel was a guy, I visited him in North Carolina. He was a guy that he kind of felt was Georgia. He took an official visit to Georgia in June. That was the only one he took, but then he told me he really wanted to also check out NC State and Michigan, maybe one other school. And Michigan was kind of seen to be that team to watch, especially because it seems like Michigan is right in that top 2, top 3 for 5-star 2024 quarterback Jaden Davis, who also plans to be in Athens on Saturday. And you kind of got the feeling that maybe Peel was kind of trending towards Michigan. What Georgia needed to do there was kind of some recruitment over the last couple months, saying, we just don't see you as a star or a safety. We see you as a guy that can play corner as well. And Brendan Peel has got the gears, man. He has got the legs. He has got the speed. He's a true low 4.4, high 4.3 type guy. Speed, got size, plays a lot on offense for his high school team. And that was a recruitment that we feel has kind of shifted kind of back towards Georgia lately. You even see Michigan insiders now pointing out their projections, their crystal ball, their forecast, whatever you want to say, on the Michigan beat, now pointing their crystal balls and their recruiting predictions toward Georgia as well. So, Brandon, that's another big visit. Big Baby is a huge visit for Georgia's ideal defensive line. I mean, really, when you think about it, considering the swings and misses and some hits of that first weekend in June, that's the one where, Arch Manning came, TJ Shanahan came, Caleb Downs came, AJ Harris came, Pierce Sperling came. And there were some swing and misses there in that class for sure. Throw Justice Haynes in that as well, that official visit class. So you take that one, you think about the track record there, and then you look at this weekend with all the names, especially a lot of 2025 names where Georgia can really make some headway with these guys. And it does look like the biggest on-campus recruiting weekend of the year so far.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Another name that you mentioned was the 2024 quarterback, Jaden Davis, or at least you've reported that. The 2024 quarterback, Jaden Davis, being on hand, and yet this comes at a time in which we're also hearing about, I guess sort of broadening the horizon here with a little bit when it comes to quarterback recruiting in 2024. The young man out of Connecticut, Ryan Puglisi, I believe I'm saying that right, Ryan Puglisi, seems like he's kind of starting to get some talk here. So it looks like that the situation for Georgia when it comes to 2024 quarterbacks may have changed a little bit. Davis on hand this weekend, but all of a sudden there's, I guess, growing chatter in other circles too.
Yeah, Brandon, I don't know if it was a change of direction. I think Ryan Puglisi has kind of always been in that top 3, that upper crust there for Georgia at quarterback. You feel like now he's a little bit more mobile than like a Julian Sayin. Now Jaden Davis is obviously very mobile as well, but you see Julian Sayin just took a visit to LSU recently. I'm gonna tell you, Brandon, this Ryan Puglisi kid, he plays some baseball. He's about 6'3", he's about 200 pounds. He's from Worcester, Massachusetts. He plays for a prep school in Connecticut, Avon Old Farms. Brandon, he's coming next weekend for the Vanderbilt game. And you know what, Brandon? If you wanted to have a story, if you wanted to have a recruiting storyline to think about for next week for Vanderbilt, there it is right there. A potential future Georgia quarterback commitment, perhaps. He's bringing his old family to Georgia that weekend. Big arm, Brandon, 6'3", kind of prototype size. Had some great workouts for Georgia. He worked out for Monken. He got to visit Georgia over the summer as well. And really, Brandon, talking to him, it really sounds like his options are Georgia, Alabama. Michigan State is also there as well. But, really, he tells me kind of privately he's got a private leader in his back pocket. That's the school he's been thinking about for some time. The only school he's visiting right now, plan to visit right now, is Georgia. That's why I think the Puglisi name is something folks got to get used to their phonetics and get used to saying, because he's certainly a name to know in the 2024 class when it comes to quarterback.
You want to talk about a culture shock coming from, being from Massachusetts, going to school in Connecticut, coming down here for an official visit to Georgia. Now, we've also kind of seen this like Xavier Truss coming out of Rhode Island. So we've seen unusual states produce SEC players before, but the high school story up there in Connecticut, very different than what he's going to experience, or a lot of these other guys are experiencing down here in Georgia. And certainly the game day atmosphere, I don't know quite that Jim Moore Jr. and the Huskies are creating the kind of atmosphere that he expects to see when he travels down here to UGA. So those will be fun quotes to read of just how maybe wide-eyed a guy like this is from coming from the Northeast, where obviously college football is a very different kind of thing, down here to the Southeast. And honestly, that's probably what's attracted him to SEC country, maybe even Georgia in particular. But it'll be interesting to see the state of Georgia and the landscape in the SEC through his eyes after, growing up and being around a region of the country where things are very, very different from a football standpoint.
I mean, you got to throw Devin Willock as well in there, Brandon. I mean, we wouldn't call them Cape Cod dogs maybe or Nor'easter dogs or whatever, but there's a few names now that when we started doing this many years ago, Brandon, we never thought that they'd be over under 5 dogs, 4 dogs from the northeastern part of the United States coming to play their football in Athens.
All right, it's our On the Road assisted by AAA with Jeff Sintel here today. And, of course, I'm traveling a lot here this weekend, going to Carrollton tonight for a great high school football game between the Trojans and East Coweta, then over to Athens tomorrow. When I'm kind of sort of cutting back and forth across the state like that, you better believe I'm happy to have that AAA membership card in my pocket just in case anything goes wrong. But that's not the only way in which AAA helps us in moments in which things kind of don't go the way they're supposed to. That's what they also do when it comes to insurance there as well, specifically with your auto insurance. And you can get more from AAA, more coverage, more benefits, everything else, including, how about this? How about small claim forgiveness there as well? Claim-free rewards, the disappearing deductible, all kinds of cool things that come your way when you get that insurance through AAA, auto insurance in particular. So make sure you're covered. Make sure you got the coverage that you need. Our friends at AAA can do that for you. You can get an insurance quote today by giving them a call, 833-718-2075. That's 833-718-2075. And, Jeff, in the little bit of time we have left here, I guess let's do kind of a quick preview on this, because one of the guys that's actually going to play tonight and then be in Athens tomorrow is the wide receiver on the side of things from East Coweta, Brady Tillman. This is a guy that's got 600 yards receiving already this year, already got 11 touchdowns. East Coweta's got a very good quarterback that will be obviously featuring tonight. But I think there's a lot of curiosity about Julian Lewis, the freshman quarterback, who in my mind is probably the most talked about freshman quarterback in our state, maybe since Trevor Lawrence. Now we'll see junior, senior, how he compares to guys like Gunnar Stockton and Brock Vandegrift and players like that. But in terms of the buzz he's already generating, I think you probably have to go back to Lawrence to find someone who was this talked about in his first year of high school. And I think tonight, when you think about Lewis on the side for Carrollton, when you think about, as I mentioned before, Tillman, a great receiver and a part of a high-powered offense for East Coweta, this should be quite a show tonight on Peachtree TV.
Yeah, Brandon, it's one of those that's going to draw the recruiting reporter back onto the sidelines with you guys as well, back onto the venue as well. And the thing about Juju is you kind of want to balance yourself as a objective reporter that's been doing this for a long time. Not too much, not too soon. The numbers he has, and then if you project them out through 4 seasons, they look like they're going to get in that Gunnar Stockton, Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson type state records category. I think it's the way he delivers the football, the arm talent he shows, the acumen he shows, the thinking brain for the position. And, when you want to sit there and say, too much too soon for Juju, what I do is when I kind of look at it, I kind of go back to a baseline. And here's the common thread. The head coach at Carrollton, Brandon, that's Joey King. I don't need to tell you who was the head coach of Trevor Lawrence when he was at Cartersville. So you've got kind of a common thread there which makes you think the same guy that guided and trained and developed a guy like Lawrence through all this hype, through all this hoopla, through all these expectations and projections, that's the same guy working with Juju Lewis now. I've been hearing about him for about 2.5 years now, Brandon. That's how talented he is. I've seen him at the All-American games, the Under Armour things. I've seen him work out with notables like Deshaun Watson, Justin Fields, everything else like that. So, this is a guy that's got the pedigree, and some things stick out. Like there was a recruiting stat that got thrown out. Juju Lewis has visited everywhere recently. He's visited Alabama. He's visited Texas. I saw a stat that really is a pretty good snapshot of where Juju Lewis already is. He's the first quarterback to get an offer from the University of Texas, the Hook'em Longhorns from the state of Georgia, since Justin Fields. And that's pretty impressive. That's mighty impressive for a program that far out, but has the prestige of Texas. When, let's face it, Brandon, everybody air bombs these quarterback offers out really early with these quarterback prodigies or whatever. And for the University of Texas, a site that covers the University of Texas, to say only 2 quarterbacks in modern recruiting history have gotten an offer that came from the state of Georgia, and those are Justin Fields and Juju Lewis, and Juju is just a freshman. That's a lot to talk about already.
It is indeed the case. We'll see it tonight. Peachtree TV, streaming at CBS46.com. And, of course, big day in Athens tomorrow with a lot of elite recruits on hand for that. So busy football weekend. Would not have it any other way. Jeff, thanks for helping us cover that as a part of being on the road, assisted by AAA, and we will look forward to seeing you tonight over there in Carrollton and then in Athens there tomorrow.
All right, man. Take it easy. Everybody drive safe. See you on Saturday.
Thank you, Jeff.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, great stuff from Jeff Sintel about what's going to go down tonight, and with the recruiting stuff throughout the weekend. We'll also have our official picks for the games here coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to be ready for all of this, whether it be the little short cruise I have coming up in December. I got another 7-night cruise coming up in February. I'm really looking forward to that. Got the DawgNation cruise coming up in April. Who knows? I may try to squeeze in a couple more cruises here there sometime in the future, too. I was kind of noticing that some of my tan's starting to go away here. So that's a reminder to me that it's time to get back to the Bahamas, time to get back on those Caribbean waters again. My goal is to stay as tan as possible, as long as possible. So let's make sure we get a chance to get back on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship so we can do just that. And, of course, you have a chance to do that same thing, too. Hopefully you'll take lots of Royal Caribbean cruises here coming up as we head towards the new year, but certainly want to see you in April with us on board Independence of the Seas, leaving out of Port Canaveral there on April 24th and going to Nassau in the Bahamas, going to Perfect Day Coco Cay, getting a great experience, just enjoying all the fun things that you can do on board Independence of the Seas, the specialty restaurants, and, of course, a chance to visit the private island oasis that is Perfect Day Coco Cay and all the incredible stuff that goes along with that. But also, there are going to be special DawgNation events there, too. One of the most fun things I did last year was that draft party. We had high atop, the very top of one of those decks. It was kind of, it's almost like a rooftop-type bar situation that we had for our NFL draft party last year, and all the Dog fans were there, and every time the Georgia player got drafted, there's this huge ovation that goes up. Everybody on the ship thought we were crazy, but we were having a great time, and that's what it's all about. So we want you to be a part of that for us here right now. Our good friend Jessica Slater, this is a travel agent specially selected for us by Royal Caribbean, can help get you booked up on this. Now, it's amazing the response we've already had. Obviously, the cruise is still several months away, many months away, but it's amazing the response we've already gotten to this. So get in there, get involved in this while you have an opportunity to do so. You can call Jessica directly, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also visit a website that she's built specifically for our cruise. It's royaldogs.com, royaldogs.com. We did the first one last year. It was amazing. Our second ever cruise with DawgNation comes up this spring, leaving out of Port Canaveral on April 24th. And we want you to be a part of it. Jessica Slater is going to help you do that. So call her, 770-718-9147, or visit royaldogs.com for a lot more on that. All right, let's make our official picks for the games this weekend. Normally I do this on Go With The Flow on Fridays with our friends at R.S. Andrews. I had to miss this week's show. I had to step away from work on Wednesday. That's the day we typically record that show. So I've kind of shared some early thoughts on this, but we'll make our official picks here right now, starting with Georgia, who has kind of floated somewhere around being a 30 or a 29-point favorite, depending on kind of where you see this, what time of the week they're at MyBookie, in terms of, you know, kind of where you've seen all of that go down. I did a little bit of research on this. We know that Georgia, when it's been favored by 40 or more points at home, has actually failed to cover in 8 straight of those opportunities. So the big, gigantic spread for Georgia has not worked out quite so well. So I try to look at, okay, what's below that number? Give me between, like, say, 29 and 35 points. That's about where this line's kind of floated here this week. And in the Kirby Smart era, Georgia 2-3 at home when favored somewhere between 29 and 35 points. I'm doing this against the spread. Now, they're 0-2 in those situations in SEC play, failing to cover as a 30-point favorite last year against South Carolina. Go back to the Tennessee game in 2018. So the very big spreads have not been automatic for UGA, but I do like Georgia minus the big number on Saturday. Now, try to get it as low as you can, obviously, so shop around or try to time this just right to get that with our friends at MyBookie. But I'll take Georgia to cover the big number on Saturday. A lot of this for me is a referendum on Auburn, who I don't think is very good. Credit to them, they haven't quit yet, but also, let's face reality. They know the Harsin era is coming to an end, and bright fires burn out the quickest. They've gotten off to fast starts the last couple of weeks. If that does not happen for them on Saturday, then they may simply be looking for a soft spot to land. You never feel great about such a large number. That creates a high variance game, but for the purposes of our conversation here, I'm going to take Georgia minus the big number. I'm also going to take Tennessee on the road at LSU. That's been around 3. You might actually find that at 2.5 as of the time we're recording this. here on this Friday afternoon or late Friday morning. So once again, the line matters when you're talking about a key number of 3 points. But here is my take on Tennessee. You'll remember that I said hosting Florida a couple of weeks ago, a team they hadn't beaten since 2016, were they ready to now all of a sudden make it look easy against Florida and win that game by double digits? We said at the time, no, that's a little too much too soon. I don't think this, though, is too much too soon for Tennessee. I think they are ready to go on the road. They haven't been favored in this spot against a top 25 level opponent in SEC play in quite some time. This sort of speaks to what has been a pretty inept program, but they've clearly improved, and the undefeated record thus far this season speaks to that. Being much better than folks would have expected a year ago speaks to that there as well. And frankly, I don't think it's that tall of a task to beat this LSU team right now. We said for LSU going into last Saturday's game at Auburn, we were going to need to see them show us something. We were going to need to see them prove something there in that spot. One of our best bet picks for last week was the LSU team total under. It was set at 27.5 last week, and LSU didn't come close to approaching that. We simply don't think LSU is very good. So at home, early crowd for a Tennessee team that kind of needs a little bit more of a marquee type performance. I don't know that the Pitt game earlier this season provided that. The Florida game was probably beneath expectations. This is a chance for Tennessee to really demonstrate how much it has improved. And with Alabama looming, I don't expect this to be a look-ahead spot. If anything, I expect this to be a galvanizing point of they want third Saturday in October to be as big as it can be and mean as much as possible. I think Tennessee takes its best swing at LSU on Saturday, and that's good enough to cover the number. We have it at 3. You might find it, 2.5 if you look carefully. I'll take Alabama minus the 24 against Texas A&M, just simply from the standpoint that I don't believe A&M's good enough to score points right now. And Alabama being at home, they may actually be more motivated because of a backup quarterback. This is around the time of the year in which Alabama typically gets it going pretty well. Even if Bryce Young doesn't play, I'm sure they are more than happy to give A&M its best shot because they lost on the field last year. There was the offseason drama, which may matter here, may not. But what matters more than anything is A&M just can't score points. Now, you've still got the really good running back in Devin Achane, but when you talk about trying to feature him in a game in which you may be playing from a deficit, that gets really hard to do. All of a sudden, by the way, now too, the other thing that becomes a huge factor here is Max Johnson appears to be injured. There's a lot of reporting that Johnson's going to be hurt and not able to play. That means you're going back to Haynes King here in this game, and we all know how that's worked out earlier for Texas A&M. So the time to get in on this may have been earlier this week. You may see that number climb in favor of Alabama as you head towards Saturday because all of a sudden for an A&M team that can't do anything offensively, they are now without Max Johnson, who they'd kind of settled in on as their starting quarterback. And then quickly our final thoughts here. The game I like the most of all this weekend is Arkansas on the road at Mississippi State. Now, we have this as an 8-point number, but if you look my bookie today, you actually see this as 9. I'm actually going against where the game is going right now, the movements in the favor of Mississippi State. And I just think this is a huge overreaction. I am not going to downgrade Arkansas greatly over the course of the last 3 weeks. Yes, they played poorly against Bobby Petrino 3 weeks ago, but I believe even though they lost Texas A&M 2 weeks ago, they were probably the right side to be on. If not for a 14-point swing on a fumble at the goal line and a missed field goal at the end, that game feels completely different. I'm not going to get obsessed with the result when the process for Arkansas actually looked pretty good that day. And I'm also not going to hold getting beaten up by Alabama against them either. I still sort of have Arkansas where I had them regardless of the results the last 3 weeks. And a couple of weeks ago, you would have seen Mississippi State at home as about a 3-point favorite against Arkansas. All of a sudden now they're 8 or 9, depending on where you might see this. That's overvaluing what Mississippi State has done, although I do think they're a quality team, and undervaluing what Arkansas still is after 2 straight losses on the field. I think there's incredible value in the Hogs here, and I'll take them there in that spot. I'll also tell you this. The game day game is Kansas-TCU. This is kind of one of the showcase national games this week. I'll take Kansas plus the 7. This is a little bit of a flyer for me on that, just simply from the standpoint. A team like TCU that expended a lot of emotion in blowing out Oklahoma last week, now going on the road into what's probably going to be a pretty jacked up Lawrence, Kansas here for this game. That's enough for me to take the 7 points. I don't have a strong feeling on that, but I will take Kansas plus the 7. As far as kind of the board picks that we typically do, coming away from the games that we all pick and kind of focusing on anything from the board, I had a hard time this week finding anything I liked all that much. I am going to take the under in South Carolina, Kentucky. That's a total at 46.5 right now for a game that was 16-10 a year ago, Kentucky getting the win there. Will Levis supposedly now is healthy. There had been some talk that he might not be healthy. Supposedly he is healthy. I think either way, this is a Kentucky team coming back home that's probably content to try to be a little bit more traditional Kentucky here, lean on the running game, try to be physical. I think for South Carolina, who needs to try to pull an upset here, they may be content to do that as well. We'll see defensively they can hold up in a game like that. But I'm going to take a flyer on under 46.5 for Kentucky, South Carolina. That's kind of my board pick there. And we'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. We'll also tell you that if you think you can make better picks than me, you probably can. Well, this is a great time to do that with our friends at MyBookie. So here's what you need to do. You need to find MyBookie online, and you need to use the promo code DawgNation. So when you kind of type in MyBookie in your browser, and it'll do the work for you. It'll get you to MyBookie. You can use the promo code DawgNation, and then after that, you sign up for your account. And then whatever money you put in there, let's say you put $400 in your account. Well, MyBookie is going to make you a winner before you even win your first bet. They're going to double that initial deposit for you. You put in $400, they're going to put $400 in for you. Now you've got $800 in your account. You're literally a winner before you make your first bet. Then after that, it's winning season at MyBookie. You can bet on anything, anywhere, anytime. That's what MyBookie provides for you. So take advantage of what folks have been doing for a long time. Make the games more fun here this weekend. Get a little action down in the game. Show how much you know about these games, whether it be the stuff on Saturdays, the pros on Sunday, whatever else. Our friends at MyBookie are there for you, and you can get that account opened up. You can get the big initial deposit bonus, but you've got to use the promo code DawgNation, all one word, spelled the way it's supposed to be, D-A-W-G. Yeah, there you go. Spelling never my strong suit. DAWG. You can check out DawgNation today with our friends there at MyBookie. All right, back here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. We're going to turn our attention back to the Georgia Bulldogs here for a moment. I thought this was really funny. So I'm not going to read too much into this. I think it's just being done for fun. But y'all should check out the UGA football UGA football equipment account on Instagram. They had a very funny, what they called uniform reveal, and we're going to show you this in kind of like 3 panels here. So this is like the first one. It sort of starts with the silver breeches, and you can have kind of like the red hue glowing on those. And then as the video kind of pans up, all of a sudden where the jersey would be revealed, they do the kind of cut into the Aaron Judge home run. This is obviously mockery of the fact that so many college football games were interrupted by Aaron Judge's pursuit of 62 home runs, which he finally got. And I think the Judge story is kind of cool, but I do understand college football fans being so frustrated about having their games interrupted. So this is what UGA football equipment was kind of making fun of, and then they show you the red helmets. And obviously the joke here is that they don't show you the jerseys. Is this a throwback to 2007? Will Georgia wear the black jerseys at home on Saturday? I'm sort of guessing that's not what this is. I think this is just them having a little bit of fun, which they certainly have the right to do. I wouldn't hate it if they did wear the black jerseys on Saturday because I think it'd be kind of a cool throwback. But nonetheless, that's not what I think this is an indication of. I think this is just them kind of making fun of the Aaron Judge meme. But nonetheless, kind of a fun throwback to an Auburn game of the past and kind of some fun mockery of a topic that college football fans certainly grew plenty tired of, which was Aaron Judge interrupting their college football on Saturday. So good job by the UGA football equipment account on Instagram for that. And by the way, speaking of the weekend, as we head toward the weekend, a great chance for us to provide you the big finish presented by the Finish Long Drink. Now, what I love here is some of you are like, hey, BA, I love Finish Long Drink on the weekend, but I also like my weekend to start a little earlier because when you go into a big football weekend, why not start it as soon and early as you could? In fact, let me showcase this here because I think this is really funny. Max Kleinfelter on Twitter reaches out and say, BA, is Thursday night too early to start programming on pre-gaming on the West Coast? Max, indeed, it is not. And you see the cool book he's got there with the Georgia Bulldog looking good and the Auburn and Florida mascot not looking anywhere near as imposing, anywhere near as tough and physical. So Max has got his head in the right place heading towards Saturday and got the Finish Long Drink ready to go there too. So he is ready to roll for the weekend. In fact, there's no reason why a weekend can't start on Thursday. And for all I know, when it comes to time zones, things like that, maybe in California it is already the weekend. So, Max, you are more than ready to go for the weekend here. Love to see you enjoying that Finish Long Drink. We appreciate you being a part of the big finish presented by the Finish Long Drink here today. And by the way, if you want to do that too, but you're saying, well, BA, I'd love to try this Finish Long Drink, but I've never seen it. I don't know how to get it. I got great news for you. If you go to the website, thelongdrink.com, you can find out where you can get some. You can find out about the different varieties, whether it be the cranberry or the Long Drink Strong, which is 8.5% alcohol by volume, the Long Drink Zero, which is no carbs, no sugar. You want the Long Drink Traditional, comes in a blue can, has kind of like that citrus, grapefruit type flavor with a great gin kick to go along with that. It's a mixed drink right there in a can. Easy to enjoy. Just pop the top, pour it into a glass, or drink it straight out of the can. It's delicious, and you can try some today, and you can find out at thelongdrink.com, where you can pick some up and be ready to go with that as we do the big finish each and every Friday here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Something else we do every day, and that is our Golden Shoe, celebrating all the fun stuff that goes around here, typically reserved for mocking the lousy, stinking Gators, and we are certainly going to do that. But on Saturday, you also have the Deep South's oldest rivalry to consider as well, and that's what our Golden Shoe is in honor of today. Coach Yeah checking in on Twitter to say, oh, that's actually evil, Coach Yeah, checking in to say that it's Auburn Hate Week. Hashtag Go Dogs. Hashtag Beat Auburn. And that meme, I'm not actually sure where this came from, but a lot of people do this kind of thing where it's like, I don't care for Auburn, which I think is really great. And you see UGA back in 1996 reaching up to take a bite out of Robert Baker, the Auburn wide receiver. I mean, I don't know that there's any image anywhere that speaks to the Georgia-Auburn rivalry more so than that great one does there. Harry Dog holding that up. A good job by evil Coach Yeah will make you a Golden Shoe winner for today. That is great stuff. And by the way, speaking of Georgia's other hated rival and the one we think that Georgia hates the most, the lousy, stinking Gators, how about 5,020 days from right now? Or I should say that 5,020 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's won a national championship. Bask in that ineptitude here for a moment. And 22 days from right now, Georgia back in Jacksonville, beating up on Florida again. That's our Gator Hater Countdown. Hope you all have a great weekend. Hope to see you on Saturday in Athens. Pop by and see us at the UGA bookstore. We'll put you on air for the DawgNation postgame show and talk to you back here on Monday for DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We'll see you then, everybody. And on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust R.S. Andrews on all of that today. Very eager to get your comments and let you weigh in on anything as it relates to the Georgia Bulldogs, the Auburn Tigers, the Deep South's oldest rivalry, and the stuff that's going down on Saturday. So let's do it. We'll get in here and have a good time. And if you're going to be, as I said before, at the game on Saturday, come by and see us for the post-game show. We'll put you on the air. Matt Rukavina giving you the old meme of I like driving in my truck, and you know the part that comes next on that for sure. Barry Watkins says, how about black jerseys, black pants, red helmets? There you go. That'd be quite a look. That would be quite a look. Quite a look. Philip Jordan Wells, always glad to see him in the comment section here. Barry also says, have we ever done a red helmet, black jersey, and silver pants for a home game? So that's what the 2007 blackout was. That was the red, the black, the silver. And I thought it looked really good. I did think it looked really good. I wouldn't mind just seeing Georgia kind of just incorporate that, not as its normal all the time look, but as a regular occurrence. I wouldn't mind doing that. Because, like, I'm a big Braves fan, too. And, you know, for, like, a long time, the Braves I thought were really cool because they only had the two uniforms. They had the white uniform. They had the obviously the gray on the road. But then they started wearing red on Fridays for a while. They were wearing, like, the cream-colored uniforms on Saturdays, I think. Started wearing, like, navy blue sometimes. They went away from the two-tone hat and started wearing, like, at some point, just kind of like the all-navy blue hat. The truth is, I just sort of got used to it. Like, I didn't love it when they first started making so many alternate uniforms. But eventually I just sort of got used to it. And I'm sure I'd probably do the same thing with Georgia, too. Like, the one thing I wish the Braves would do is bring back the road powder blues from the 80s and wear that as a home game with white pants. I'd love to see that. Every time I play MLB The Show against my son, that's what I always do. Anytime, he won't usually let me be the Braves, but anytime I get the chance to be a team that has a powder blue 80s uniform, I'll always, like, take the powder blue jersey, pair it with some white pants or something like that, and try to find some sort of hat that looks good with it. I'm always kind of making that my look on MLB The Show. Johnny Robinson says people keep underestimating the Missouri defensive line. They are good. And I think that's one of the things that has come out of that Missouri game is I do think if you're the kind of person that likes making picks and predictions, whether it be bets or just, you know, like sort of maybe pool picks with your friends, I do think factoring in the Missouri defense is pretty good is probably worth considering here. Now, one of the picks I was tempted to make was Florida minus the points on Saturday. I think it's 11, and obviously I don't take great pleasure in picking Florida. That's maybe why I didn't do it. But here's the thing I'd watch out for from Missouri. They could have beat Auburn and didn't. They had a chance to beat Georgia and didn't. That takes something out of a team. And now, in maybe a little bit of a flat spot emotionally, they're going on the road to Florida. It's a long trip for them. There's been, some emotion the last couple of years between these two teams, but Dan Mullen's gone, so I don't know how much any of that really kind of carries over. I think that you might find a lesser Missouri team this week than you saw last week against Georgia. So this might be a semi-contrarian play here, but I actually like Florida minus the 11 against Missouri on Saturday. That's not an official pick for me, but I was tempted to make it as a pick. It's kind of like what I said last week about I liked Utah minus 10 at home against Oregon State, but just didn't make it because I don't really like taking such large favorites necessarily. But Utah was pretty clearly the right side, and they won by 30-something points. I sort of feel like Florida's in a similar spot here at home this week. That I think it's about an 11-point number, something like that. It would not surprise me at all to see Florida cover that number. Carter Lawson says, at least I look good when my son beats me. Yeah, that's the case. I don't usually play very well in these video games, but at least I look good. And I probably spend way more time getting my uniform ready for a video game than an adult male should be doing. I've never been a huge video game guy, but I do like playing games with my son. And it takes me like 5 minutes to get my look just right. This is Madden or the show or whatever else. I'm always just trying to get that look just right. So I probably spend more time doing that than an adult man probably should. Wade Walford on Facebook says we need Keely Ringo's A game this week. Wade, I think you're about right on that. David Hogue checks in to say, to BA and fellow dogs, I apologize for our close call with Missouri. As always, I had my cheap red Georgia Solo Cup while I watched the game. However, I forgot to take sips during the game. Not that I'm superstitious, but the close call was on me. So David stepping up to take one for the team there, acknowledging that his pre-game ritual was, or I should say in-game ritual was broken, and that may have caused Georgia some issues. That's interesting because a lot of the Georgia fans I talked to were actually taking more sips from their red Solo Cup during the game because of what they were seeing on the field. So interesting that you weren't, David, but that's very funny. Good stuff. Isha saying that the young players in this day and age are all about their swag, so giving them more of a uniform selection will help them feel better about joining the team. I think that might be true. I also think I've never seen as much evidence that that is true as you might think. Like what you're saying totally sounds true to me. Is like, kids like to look good. Clearly they're thinking a lot about the sneakers they're wearing and just the stuff they're wearing on a regular basis. It's called the fit. Their fits. That's what people are into that. I would say that young people are into that now more so when I was young. Like when I was young in the 90s, it just sort of seemed like people just sort of wore whatever, like very baggy clothes. I don't know that people are quite as into their fits. I believe that's still the word that gets used here. Whereas I do think, just generally speaking, fashion is a little bit more a part of the culture than kind of it used to be, I think. But with that said, there are plenty of teams that have ugly uniforms that always have good players, and there are plenty of teams that have amazing uniforms, and they change them all the time, and they don't really get anybody. I sort of think that the idea that gear leads to recruits, this is a very crazy take, but I sort of think that's a little bit of propaganda from the apparel makers, that they've kind of pushed this idea of, well, if you'll just have 1,000 uniforms, you'll get all these recruits. When I really think that's just a way to sell 1,000 uniforms. Obviously kids do get excited about uniforms because clearly the Georgia players like, wearing the alternate uniforms for their photos. But the fact that Georgia doesn't even own 85, editions of those, uniforms has not stopped the players from coming to Georgia. So I get what you're saying. It's like, it seems like that would help recruiting. But in real life, I don't really see a lot of examples where that is true. Like, okay, so Oregon shows up as a finalist for a lot of recruits, but for the most part, with the exception of a small handful, they actually haven't won that many recruiting battles. They won, small handful, but it's not like they're a massive recruiting power, although, clearly they do have some name recognition and some cachet. So that's kind of my take on that. Is some of this I sort of feel like is Nike, Adidas, Under Armour propaganda. Let me get some YouTube comments. On YouTube. 225 girl on the subject of Baylor. Yeah, that's the team that wears a lot of different uniforms. And I think their look is pretty sharp. I'm colorblind, so I don't always get into the colors as well, but I think that something about the Baylor look kind of looks good together, although 225 girl was not happy with what they wore last week. Thomas T-Bone asking about Ella Dorsey. Ella's on vacation, so Ella's going to be back next week, I think. She had already planned on being gone for a couple of weeks, and so we're going to get her back here pretty soon. What's Christy talking about? She's in here laughing about something. Let's see what else. What else is going on over here? Apparently y'all are messing with G Grace again. No surprise there. Beer Cans and Batty's got big plans for the weekend. I love to see that from our buddy Beer Cans. That's great to see. He's getting settled in, ready to go. You love that. G Grace says that he's just respecting me right now by not firing back at some of y'all. He says don't stir me up. So G Grace is he's in here showing his maturity and demeanor, which is great. That's really funny. Let's see what else. Jonathan Aaron says, why don't we go back to the Power Rangers uniform? I know how much you love that. Yeah, the one they wore for Boise State in 2011. I got to tell you, like, there have been a handful of days where it was just really, really hard. And part of what made me enjoy last season so much is I can remember a lot of days that were nowhere near that enjoyable. I'm telling you, that Boise State game in 2011, that was really hard for me because you had Georgia in the Georgia Dome against a Mountain West team, and it was pretty obvious they were not going to win. And when Georgia got down that day, I never really felt like the crowd got into the game all that much because I think when you look down there on the field and you saw this like Space Cadet uniform, I think subliminally, subconsciously, I don't think the fans thought they were watching Georgia because, Georgia just played Boise State a couple of years before that and blasted them. That was in Athens, but nonetheless. And now they're sort of struggling with this Mountain West team, and they look like, Buck Rogers or something like that. It was just the whole, which is a very dated reference, I do realize. But the whole thing was just, it was just not a good day. It was not a good day. My other version of that is, after all the stuff that had gone wrong with the 2008 blackout, when Georgia came out and wore black pants and the black helmets to play Florida in 2009, that's about as close as an adult as I've come to, like, crying. Like, that mad cry thing? Like, I almost did a little bit of a mad cry because I could not believe that Georgia thought that was a good idea. And it was so obvious from the word go they were just going to get dribbled like a basketball. And they did. And listen, I hate it because I love that Georgia team then as much as I love these Georgia teams now. But that was just dumb. It didn't look good. It didn't look like Georgia. It was just dumb. And, so there are a couple of days in which, boy, it was tough. And you're certainly circling one of them when you mentioned 2011 against Boise State. John Main says, I'm showing my age with the Buck Rogers comment. But that's kind of what it looked like, right? Not like cool, like Star Wars science fiction, but like when I was a kid, Buck Rogers would be like on TV in the afternoon. It's like a rerun, stuff like that. And like when I was a kid, I thought it was cool, but you go back and see some of those things now, you kind of realize the costumes and things like that weren't quite Hollywood level, you know what I'm saying? And so that's kind of what the 2011 Georgia Boise State uniform sort of looked like. It sort of looked like kind of the lower rent version of what space outfits would look like, not like the very big blockbuster budget Star Wars costumes, but sort of the whatever they had laying around in the costume closet. That's kind of what the Buck Rogers stuff looked like when I was a kid. And that's sort of, to me, what it looked like Georgia was wearing. Kirby's visor going in on somebody. I can't even tell what that's about. That's funny though. That's funny. Beer Cans of Batty says he thought the crowd was in the game from the Brandon Boykin touchdown to open after that Kellen Moore crushed Todd Grantham. I guess that just was not a good day for me. That was not a good day. Not a good day. That was not a good day. Y'all are having a good time in here today. Stick D says, what year were the Silver Britches instituted? Okay, so I actually don't 100% know the answer to this. Was that 1980? Did they wear white pants before that in the 70s? I actually don't know the answer to that. So I remember when they started wearing silver breeches on the road. That was somewhere like late 80s, I guess. I think, or maybe late 80s, early 90s. I can remember being old enough when they stopped wearing red pants on the road and started wearing silver breeches for every game. But I'm not old enough to remember when the silver breeches first came around. But I believe it may have been 1980, which is obviously ironic, I guess. But they may have worn the white pants prior to that. Buddy Lee Z says, with all the players injured, that's part of the game. We can't use that as an excuse. No, I agree. Georgia's supposed to be deeper than their injuries. I agree with that. I do there as well. Good to see Mr. Smith here in the comment section as always. Always happy to see Dare Sr. in here. Jonathan Aaron, there are no bots in here today, or yeah, y'all are having a good time over there at DawgNation YouTube page. Always nice to see. Let me get a couple more DawgNation.com comments, and we're gonna get ready to go after that. Cam Hasty says, definitely wore red breeches on the road in 80. That's right, for the Herschel Walker game there at Tennessee. You can go back and remember that for sure. And like they wore those red pants on the road in my lifetime. I started getting heavy into the team as a fan, young kid, mid-80s. They were wearing red pants on the road back then. I think the silver breeches may have been instituted for the 1980 season, and prior to that, they may have worn white pants at home, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Randy Hall says the pullover for today. Yeah, this is one that I like to bring out from time to time. This was a gift from the Tournament of Roses. I'm holding up the wrong. Yeah, there you go. This was a gift from the Rose Bowl. So this is like my favorite thing to remember back being in Pasadena for one of the special weeks of my life. And having won the national championship last year for Georgia does not take away from the fact that that was a dream come true to be in that state for that Rose Bowl, the great game against Oklahoma. And I just want to embarrass to say this, but one of the traditions for the bowl games is the media get gifts. And the big bowls give pretty nice gifts. And this was the media gift for the Rose Bowl. It was a quarter zip pullover. I've lost some weight since 2017, so it's pretty big on me, but I still enjoy wearing it. So Dogs on Top says the silver breeches were worn in the 30s and the 60s. And they actually returned to them in 1980. That's very helpful, Dogs on Top. I appreciate that. Rambo says, yeah, debuted in 39. So it's amazing that Georgia could get silver breeches in 1939 but can't get them in 2022. Something about that seems fishy, right? Now, I've also, the last time I said this in the show about not having the true silver breeches, I guess somebody said that the sheeny, is that how you say it, like the metallic sheen isn't breathable, and that's why Georgia wears the gray, is because that the fabric just breathes better when you don't have the metallic sheen. I have no idea if that's true, but that is what somebody told me. Randy Hall said about the player I'm most excited about seeing tonight. It's easy to say Julian Lewis, and I am. The freshman quarterback, I'm really excited about him. That's a big showcase game for him, a freshman quarterback. But I mentioned before, so when we do high school football on TV, there are two things I really enjoy. On the one hand, obviously this is a for-profit business, so we're going to put the star players on display, and that's what Julian Lewis is. On the other hand, it is so rewarding when a player gets a chance to play on TV, and you can watch this. This has happened for us several times. Guy has a good game on TV, and he gets 1,000 offers the next week. And I think that may potentially go down tonight. There's a couple of guys on the East Coweta side, but one I mentioned with Jeff is Brady Tillman. Tillman's actually going to visit Georgia tomorrow. It's the wide receiver's got huge numbers, but I don't believe he has any offers, I don't think. I believe that's about to change, and I think TV is going to help him do that. So I'm just someone who loves high school football. I love the fact that guys, use the high school experience to kind of build their future, build their lives. And so, yeah, we're going to put star players on display because why would you not? But second to that, if we can shine a spotlight on a player that's very, very good but just needs that extra attention to get some offers, of course we're going to do that there as well. And for a guy like Tillman, that's one of the things that's going to happen tonight. Now, he's not the only player in this game where that's kind of true, but he's the first that kind of comes to mind for me on that answer. I think you'll like the East Coweta wide receiver, Brady Tillman, tonight. All right, final comments. So I guess we don't really have – it's like – I know you can kind of colorize old movies, but you couldn't colorize an old photo of like a Georgia uniform from the 30s and see what the silver actually looked like. You can't really do that, right? It'd just be your own imagination, I guess. I don't really quite know how that works. But it's interesting to know they wore those way back in the 30s. I did not know that. Yeah, John Chappell said the same thing. He says, funny how difficult it is to find old color photographs of the Georgia uniforms prior to 1964. Yeah, like I love baseball cards. And the first color baseball cards, I think, were, was it 56 Bowman, the one that looked like the TV set? Was it the first color baseball card? I think the first full color baseball card. I believe that may be right. 56 Bowman, I believe, may be the first full color baseball card, but that was not obviously common. So Randy Hall, who's a pilot, says he arranged the flight for the UGA Redcoat Band for the Rose Bowl that year. That's a really cool thing. Keith Finney says his preference would be only the jersey changes for Georgia. Everything else stays the same. Not a bad idea. Cam Hasty, this is I don't mean to laugh at this, but sometimes you have to laugh to keep from crying. He says, one of my good friends was on the training staff in 2009 and told me that Rick looked at the team before the game and said, if you play as good as you look, we're going to win. He says, turns out the opposite was true. Yeah, unfortunately, that was the case. That was the case. Brad Houghton also reminding us that Alabama does not need to do any different uniforms, and that is certainly an example of that. I also believe that I know in 2007 the uniform was sort of used as kind of a motivational ploy, but the truth is if Georgia were to wear black tomorrow, I don't think anybody would interpret that as, oh, Georgia wants extra motivation. I think most people would just sort of interpret it as a fashion statement. That's one of the reasons why I don't really have a lot of concern about Georgia wearing alternate uniforms, because to me it's not a fake motivational ploy. It may have been that in the past, but now it's just a look. And as I've also said, I don't know that it, greatly enhances your chance with recruits or anything, but, black is a normal color for Georgia. It's well within their right, I believe, to wear one of their normal colors. Now, what I kind of get annoyed by is when a team like Ohio State, which does not have black as part of its color scheme, all of a sudden they're dressed in all black. Like, college football teams, the only big 9-figure businesses that would take their recognizable brand and alter it on national television. This would be like, if McDonald's did a commercial one day, but instead of the golden arches, they had, I don't even know what, like something different, right? That most big companies would never alter their recognizable look because it's that brand recognition you want when you turn on the TV. But college football teams do that all the time. And I'm not necessarily against it. I have a pretty, loose stance on uniforms now. But college football teams are the only big entities, big businesses that behave that way. Let's see what else. Keith Finney, no, I did not see that. That's really funny, though. I did not see that. Randy Hall saying there's been an arrest in the Elijah DeWitt situation. Obviously, the very good Jefferson wide receiver who was so tragically killed this week. And I guess there's been an arrest made on that. So I am not aware of that, but I'll follow that news because, honestly, this is just such a sad and scary situation. It's one of those things that's kind of gone outside the boundaries of just our normal football world. My wife, who, does not always follow, these kinds of stories nearly as closely as I do, certainly, she's been really aware of this. We were talking about it a lot this morning, too. It's just, this is one of those things that has really rocked our state, for people who live in that Gwinnett area, for people who live in the Jefferson area, for people who follow high school football. There are just so many different ways in which a story like this kind of grabs hold of you. So very scary, very scary. So yeah, that's tough. So we'll continue to follow that for sure. I try to transition back to a couple of happier comments before we wrap things up. Keith Finney on the subject of Arizona. Okay, so somebody's wearing a cookies and cream uniform. That's pretty wild. That's pretty wild. Pretty wild indeed. All right, final comments, and we're going to go. Jack Marino predicting Georgia win by at least 31 points on Saturday. Christy gives you the go for 2 and 22. You can always trust Christy to be on the right side. Appreciate that, Christy. Thank you indeed. And Craig Fawcett says the AJC is reporting 2 arrests in the Elijah DeWitt situation here. So good reporting from them, and hopefully this is an indication that justice is on its way to being served. I don't know many of the facts right now, but obviously you want justice to be done in this situation for sure. All right, we got to go for right now. Chase Smith saying, by the way, that Georgia should stay traditional. The biggest brands don't change their logo or their look, and I think that's true. So I'll be a little bit corny for 1 second. So a lot of times we'll take our family to Disney World, and when you go to Disney World, here's what I'm always kind of fascinated by: is there like sort of 2 parts of Disney World? There's one part of Disney World that's the exact same as it was in the 1960s, and there's another part of Disney World that kind of changes a lot pretty frequently, and somehow they find a way to make both of those things stand next to each other, and it kind of makes sense together. That you have things that never change, you have things that change rapidly. The rapid change makes people excited. The unchanging stuff makes people nostalgic, and that combination of those two is a pretty powerful element in business. So I think that the black jerseys for Georgia are a little bit of a thing like that for me, Chase, where when Georgia wears the black to go alongside the red helmet and the silver breeches, to me, it only stands to remind you how iconic the helmet is, how iconic the silver breeches might be. And that's one of the reasons why, if I had my way, I'm okay with wearing a little bit of a black jersey type thing from time to time. I probably wouldn't like to see the entire uniform change, but I guess I'm sort of one man, one vote on that and majority rules. But to me, when you wear the black jersey to go along with the other stuff, it only kind of reminds you that it's like just enough change to also make you feel really good about the things that don't change at all. Red jersey, the big power G on the side of that, the silver breeches, which we found out today have been a lot longer a part of the Georgia program than I realized. So I get where you're coming from on that. Too much change is sort of artificial harm to a brand, and most big entities just don't do that. But a little bit of change can also help accentuate the things about your look, your branding that don't ever change, which is not necessarily a bad thing either. So interesting comments for sure. Just to be clear, I actually don't think Georgia's going to wear any kind of alternate look on Saturday. I think the equipment account was just having some fun with that, but we like having fun too, so we don't hate that at all. All right, so so here is reporting. This is coming out of WGAU. This is a radio station in Athens that multiple suspects. This is just 5 minutes ago. Tim Bryant, who's obviously been on the radio there for a long time. Multiple suspects arrested in the shooting death of the Jefferson High School football player. These are obviously just suspects. This is obviously early days here, so we don't know anything more than the fact that arrests have been made. But this will be a story to follow because in addition to being tragic, it's also just really scary. This is a shopping mall. This is a place that I've been to many, many times. This is so. In addition to the tragedy and the sadness you feel for Elijah DeWitt, the Jefferson player, and his family and that Jefferson football community, it's also just scary. It's just flat out scary, and that's another thing that kind of grips people about this. So arrests are made We don't know the status of the suspects or obviously, they'll have their chance to argue their case in court, of course. We'll respect the legal procedure on that, but you certainly want justice to be served here. And we will we'll follow that story. And obviously the AJC, you can go to ajc.com and read more about that there as our state. And I'm sure it'll come up on our broadcast tonight because everybody that I've talked to connected to high school football this week, that is all anybody's talking about. The very, very sad story coming out of Jefferson here this week. So I'm sure it'll come up tonight on Peachtree TV. And we continue to send out prayers. Jefferson's really kind of in the shadow of Athens, and a lot of us drive through Jefferson to get to Athens each and every week. So as you're driving there on 129 tomorrow, you'll be thinking about that community. It's hurting right now. It is hurting bad. And Elijah at one point in time went to Prince Avenue, so he's pretty tied into the Athens, was tied into the Athens community too. So sad, tragic, and also scary. And now we'll kind of follow what comes next. And the next step in that's a couple of arrests have been made. So we'll find out more about it and read about it at theajc.com. AJC's got you covered on all the serious news. We don't really talk about serious news around here. We try to have fun and be lighthearted, but there is serious stuff happening in the world. And the AJC covers it, and they do it well. AJC.com for that. And also I'll thank our friends at R.S. Andrews, who will bring you Go With The Flow tonight. I won't be on that show, but you will be able to see it. And, of course, the R.S. Andrews cool down each and every day here. Find them online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Heating system. We're getting ready for the cold weather time of year. Go ahead and get your heating system tuned up and ready to go. You can find them online, rsandrews.com. They'll get that furnace tuned back up to factory fresh specs, and maybe you can get another winter out of a heating system that someone's told you need to replace. You can trust R.S. Andrews for that. I'll see you on Saturday in Athens. If you're going to be at the game, come see us at the bookstore after the game. We'll put you on air for the UGA bookstore presentation of our DawgNation postgame show. We will have high school football tonight on Peachtree TV, and then back here Monday for DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to seeing you then, everybody.